When was the last time you raised your fees? I was doing a seminar this past weekend, and I asked the room how many people in the room, as a group of dentists, had raised their fees since January of 2020. That's January of 2020, before the pandemic even began. Now, I was expecting every hand in the room to go up. Well, the results kind of shocked me. Only half the room raised their hands. That means the other half had not had a fee increase since prior to the pandemic. And this is a problem, and we're seeing it, especially with newer clients coming in. We're seeing quite a few of them have not had a fee increase, especially in the face of all the economic issues we have going today, especially the inflationary issues. And that's what I want to talk about in this week's tip, specifically your fees. Is it time to raise them, and how to do it smoothly in your practice? So look, we all know costs are going up. If you're paying attention to this stuff, in January, year-over-year inflation was at 7.5%. Now, that's a big number. As a matter of fact, I did a video on inflation late last year or towards the end of last year when it was close to 6, and that was a big deal. Well, now we're at 7.5. That means something that cost you $100 in January of 2021 would cost you $108 in January of 2022. And keep in mind, this number is an average. In other words, certain costs may be higher. For example, we see it with gas. We're definitely seeing it with things like wages. Wages have gone up, especially in the dental industry, astronomically. I was talking to a client recently who's paying 75% more now for a hygienist in his area than he was paying back in 2019. Lab costs are going up. I talked to a lab the other day that's charging 14% more for zirconium crowns, and things like marketing, Google pay-per-click is up, in some cases as much as 69 or 70%. So, I mean, you know this, I know this, we're buying things, costs are going up. So now here's the problem. If you're charging the exact same as you've always been charging and costs are going up, where is that money coming from? Think about this for a second. Yeah, you guessed it, from you. That is coming out of your profitability. And eventually it can sort of cross, meaning where it's starting to cost you more to operate than it costs you, than you make, which obviously is not an ideal situation. So look, if you haven't done a fee increase, this is something that you have to look at doing now. You have to confront this. And, you know, the idea of raising fees incrementally has been around for a long time. And it used to be a much more tame type of a situation. I did a video on it, as a matter of fact, back in October of 2019. You can see it if you want to click here. And you'll see I was very tame as I was discussing it. You know, inflation would go up 2 or 3% a year, so you'd raise your fees to keep up with that. You might forget a year, and it was not that big of a deal. Well, when you start having inflation coming in at 7.5%, that becomes more problematic. And if it goes up any higher, it becomes more problematic. And the only thing I would ask you to consider is this as well, in line with all of this, is usually when a price inflates, and this isn't always the case, but when a price inflates, let's say a can of Coke costs you $1, right? It's $1 to buy a can of Coke. Well, inflation hits, so now it's $1.25. Even if inflation cools off, in other words, instead of 7%, it goes down to 2%. That Coke is still $1.25. It's not like, you know, people look and go, oh, well, inflation's lower, let's lower the price of the Coke. Generally, these prices stay about the same. So again, if you have not increased your fees, and meanwhile you've got costs going up in your environment, you're gonna find yourself in trouble. So now, how do you go about doing a smooth fee increase in your practice, or do you even need to raise your fees? Well, let me give you a couple of points that you could apply right now. First thing I would do if I were you is get your hands on a fee survey to see sort of where you stand. Now, I know Dental Economics has a regional fee survey. I'm a bit old school, so I'm a bigger fan of the Wasserman Guide. We'll put a link in the description if you want to check it out. I have no relationship with them, so I don't get anything for that. I just like their product. And essentially what the Wasserman Guide does is it breaks down by CDT code, it breaks down the fee for that procedure in your zip code, so it's very specific, and then it gives you a range of fees, usually from the 30th or 40th percentile up to the 90th percentile. Now, what does that mean? If you're in the 30th percentile, that would be a very low fee. What that means is you and 30% of the other dentists in your area charge that amount or less. And 70% of the dentists in your area charge more than that. You see, so you'd be at the low end. If you're in the 40th percentile, that means 60% of the doctors in your area charge more than that. So you get your hands on the Wasserman Guide for your zip code, and then you take a look at your current fee schedule. Now, the only thing I don't know is because inflation has been a bit more active the last year or so, I don't know if they're keeping up with that, perfectly, in which case you might have to even go a little higher. So I would look at where do my fees fall. If my fees fall in the 50th and 40th percentile, that is most likely too low. I'm a bigger fan of being in the 60th or 70th percentile, but again, you have to do what is real to you, right? And again, keep in mind, if you're looking and you find yourself in the 60th percentile, that may not be accounting for 7.5% inflation in the last year, so you might have to go even a little higher. So let's say you do this and you see that a few of your fees are off. The next thing, and you decide that it's time to raise fees, what would I do? I get a spreadsheet with all my CDT codes and my fees that I charge, and I would look at how much I want to raise them to put me in the percentile that I want to be in. Now, let's say I find that the Profi fee in the 60th percentile in my area is $130. Okay, D1110, I think if I remembered that correctly. You find that's $130 to be in the 60th percentile. Well, you look at your fee and you're charging $65. Okay, this is a bit extreme, just to give you kind of an example. That's a pretty big fee increase. If I came in for a cleaning 5 months ago and it was $65 and I come back and now it's $130, which of course the x-rays are going to go up, as well as any exam you might do, I might go, wow, that's what's going on. Well, if you don't feel comfortable just bam putting it at $130, then what you might want to do is an incremental increase. You might want to go from 65 to 85, and then 2 or 3 months later bop it up to 105, until you hit that 130 point so that your fees are in line. You could do it. It's a little bit more difficult than just boom getting it done, but if you feel it would create a huge amount of waves in your practice, you can always do it that way. So once you've decided how you're going to raise your fees, step 1, do I need to raise my fees? Step 2, what am I raising them to? Step 3, I need to get the team on board. All right, I need to, number 1, explain it to the team, explain why to the team, and then get them to understand and get them on board and get them familiar with it, especially people who deal with finance in the office, your financial coordinator, your treatment coordinator, the folks that are quoting prices to patients. You want to make sure that they're fully up on the new fee schedule. I mean, look, we're all going to make mistakes. I don't know if you do this like I do. If it's the new year, I'll still put the old year. I'll put, 1/1/21 instead of 22. It happens when you're writing a note. But you want to get them familiar and conversant with these fees as quickly as possible. Now, the only thing this does not solve is if you have a high degree of PPO infiltration in your practice. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's say 50 or 60% of your active patient base is in a PPO in which you participate. So sure, you've raised your crown fee up to $1,400 where it should be, but you're still only getting $800 from the PPO. That's all they're going to allow you to charge. Well, that's a problem. As a matter of fact, it's become more of a problem recently with some of these PPOs. You've probably heard about this, with Delta trying to go for a 10% reduction. I think they got a, don't quote me on this, I think they got an 8.8% reduction is what they negotiated. And then other insurance companies followed suit, right? Again, don't quote me on all this. I've just been keeping up on this news peripherally. But the point being is you have PPOs, different insurance companies now, actually lowering compensation for participating doctors while their costs are skyrocketing. As a matter of fact, going forward, this is going to be a problem for dentists if they are too reliant on participating with insurance. I'm all fine with accepting assignment on insurance. I think it's cool, but I'm not a fan of PPOs. And if you're in them, especially if you have a lot of PPO patients in your practice, you need to start thinking about how you're going to get out, because it might be a process. It might take time to phase out of those PPOs. The good news is, for the most part, you're not going to lose as many patients as you think. We'll talk about that in future videos. So if you have PPOs and you want to do a fee increase, that might be a problem. You're going to be raising the fee on the folks that don't have the PPO, and you're not going to be raising it on the PPO patients. So you need to get out. Ultimately, that would be the way to go. And, sort of the upshot of all this with where it's going for dentists in general, like play this forward into the 2020s. If you have 75% of your practice is PPO, and your costs are going up. And remember, if those costs go up, they're probably going to stay there, all right? You won't have, as inflation cools off, your staff come up to you and ask to get less money. That's most likely not going to happen. So your costs are going to stay up. you're in these PPOs, which means you don't have control over those fee schedules. Play that forward 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. That's not a pretty picture. That's a rough ride. So if you're interested in getting out of PPOs or having any help with this process, where do you stand with fees, sort of analyzing your practice as far as your fee structure and your participation insurance, as well as how to get out, we're offering what we call a fees and plans analysis, where we will look at this for your practice and give you an idea of where you stand, as well as give you an idea of what steps you should be taking to move yourself out of network in order to be compensated fairly for what it is that you're doing. So if you'd like to find out more about the fees and plans analysis, I put a link in the description below. You fill out a form and we can set that up for you. All right, so that about does it for this week's tip. I hope that helps. If you guys have any questions, I appreciate your feedback. Let me know here at MGE. Otherwise, if you want to find out more about MGE, you can visit us online at mgeonline.com. And if you want to make sure that you keep receiving notifications for these tips and you're regularly informed when they come out, make sure to click the subscribe button and click notifications so that you find out. We'll see you at the next tip.